to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those joining the program for the first time, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. With us today, we have a guest, Piotr Kochanowski, who is an auditor, a risk assessor, and a geopolitical observer. And the topic of our conversation is the recent series of mysterious or seemingly mysterious events involving Prigozhin's so-called mutiny, his background with Putin, and the explanation for his strange comings and goings to and from Russia. Where is he now? Is he really someone on the brink of doom and certain death and destruction, or is there more to the story? This is what we are going to explore in today's conversation. Piotr, you wrote a fascinating report which started with the historical background, underscoring the importance of intelligence and security services in Russia, going back to the Tsarist era. And this is a topic that I've delved into past programs, but here I want to focus on something specific that you yourself mentioned in your Polish language electronic book that you published, which is Operation Trust. And Operation Trust involves a technique of agents provocateurs and essentially false flag operations where the Russian activists and revolutionaries and their counterparts would disguise as the other side in order to fish out and figure out the loyalties of the opposition, and also as as a psyops campaign of simply causing chaos with their enemies. So can you tell us a little bit more about this operation, what it tells us about the mindset of these agencies, and what lessons could be drawn for us today from this very familiar type of infiltration?
Yes, maybe I would just say one more thing about myself, because it is I also my master thesis was about the foreign affairs, and I was very, I would say, comprehensive analysis of foreign policy of a given country on the example of Great Britain during Second World War. And it was, as my mentor professor said, that I also needed to catch up with what Russia was as an ally and before as an enemy of the United Kingdom, to have some background going back to, let's say, 2 centuries more. But I didn't put in my master thesis, but I'm a bit of aware. So back to the topic. Not that I'm just auditor interested, but it is like my first field of studies. So basically, this Operation Trust tells us that Russian country now is basically owned by secret service. It could be said like that, because in other countries there is some kind of control over political mainly, but at least it is like the administration and then secret service. And in Russia it is interrelated this way, that it could be simply said that the secret service owned the country basically. So when during it was still Tsarist time, but it was conducted, this Operation Trust, during communist times, and it was basically aimed to pretend to be the opposition to the communist power that was gaining more grip on the Russia, and to track actual agents of the West, or some real opposition. So I make parallel to this during this so-called rebellion, mutiny of Prigozhin, because I think that the most likely is similar operation, like to track inside. Maybe some people, we don't know. Maybe after some time we would know that it was some internal opposition who was these people were contacting with the foreign like CIA, MI6, foreign agencies, and it was just some one part, or it was just Prigozhin himself contacted the foreign agencies, or it was all set up. We don't really, we can just make what is more likely, what is possible, I think, because we never be sure. So my gathering is that like three main scenarios, that either Prigozhin was all is like for Western media, and especially the hoax in the West, they feel that Russia is collapsing, will be some more different countries, which one owned but by different oligarchs and so on, and it was maybe play to their aims, dreams, goals. And maybe Prigozhin himself set it up that for example took money and pretended to be useful tool, and then made what he did. Or possibly there was some kind of real opposition that they wanted, but basically I think it is less likely. Also, as I said, that there is very important person in Russia. His name is Sechin. He's the CEO of Rosneft, and he's the second after Putin. So maybe if not Putin was behind this all operation, if it is the main reason behind it, it would have been the Sechin to show that the military circles and others that they should do better, or at least for this segment of the population which are not against this let's say war, but they want this war to be more efficiently conducted. I would say like that. It's always many ingredients to some cake, I would say like this.
Now, this would not be the first time where the apparent opposition to Putin nevertheless served an important function that favors Kremlin's ambitions. For instance, the most famous current opposition leader, Navalny, has been consistent in supporting the Kremlin's plans to annex first Crimea and then the invasion of Ukraine. Not only he himself, he's now in prison and not really available for too much of comments, but the people around him, his team, have had connections with some of the oligarchs in Russia who have not yet been fully sanctioned, and with their banks, which raises many questions. How can you have an opposition that's linked financially to people supporting the regime and still be considered opposition? And yet they are given the floor at all the international fora and treated as legitimate, independent opposition and victims of the regime. So it seems to me that there seems to be this pattern of using controlled opposition or apparent diversions and apparent factional differences for Putin to maintain power, to maintain control, while creating appearances of dysfunction that misleads Western assessment of his actions, and makes it more difficult to predict what will happen next, or to kind of lead the events in their own direction. But Prigozhin has fascinated many because he is such a colorful character. He's not like some typical boring politician that can easily be imagined to be manipulated. He is someone with an organized crime background. So there's this assumption about his personality of not of being fairly independent or having his own will in this function. But and people have associated him with Wagner so closely that many mistakenly believe he founded Wagner. But let's look at Prigozhin's history with Putin and why Putin would ever rely on such a person to begin with. You mentioned in your report that Prigozhin, who was indeed released from prison for criminal activities, at the time Putin was rising through political ranks in St. Petersburg. He connected to Putin, and suddenly rose very quickly, started opening casinos and all these legitimate or semi-legitimate businesses for, used to launder money and to give legitimacy to these ex-criminal, ex-gangsters who then became prominent business people. And why Prigozhin? There were plenty of such people who were being released from prisons, and Putin himself has an intelligence background, not a criminal background. He himself is not some ex-jailbird. Why did he choose Prigozhin? How did they connect? And how did it help Putin and his own activities at the time?
That I'm not maybe some acquaintance with this background when they actually meet, but it was that Prigozhin was starting with his business partners. Maybe we can track them and see who they are really, because after some time Prigozhin ventures on his own. It was Putin was in charge of city administration. I'm reading because city administration supervising casinos. So there was first time when they actually have any connection, and the Prigozhin was dealing with these casinos with his business partners. So it was first time, and then he went on from these casinos to catering business, restaurants, and then after that he was started to be independent. His Concord Catering started to serve Putin himself and the Kremlin, and then the military army and so on, so on. So basically, see, I see that maybe Putin saw in him that the character, as you say, that maybe some criminals, some other people, some businessmen were not the profile that Putin wanted, and maybe used when there is needed, as Prigozhin proven that he can be very good at internet propaganda, in these internet activities, and also himself as a person. He's like either it is role or his character. He looks really convincing. What he says, what he does on internet. Also, he has like actually he broken the law because there is forbidden to criticize publicly the operation, as the Russian calls the special operation, and Prigozhin constantly on his social media, Telegram channels or wherever he could, he recorded videos criticizing the military, but never Putin. He said that Putin is misleading, has been, as he's still misled by his generals, that especially the Shoigu, the Minister of Defense, who is actually not a politician. Actually, he has no military background, and the Chief of Staff, the Gerasimov, he's actually one of the main strategists since years in Russia. So I think that is like, but he criticized the boss. And maybe I will go back a little about Navalny. You said, I think that it is quite similar to what we had in Poland, because once I watched some documentary, I can't recall what it was, but there was some Stasi. So it was the German the German Democratic Republic agents and whole agency, and there were former members, and say that their aim all the time was to suppress and make any opposition not existent. And in Poland it was different. There were two generals. They started their careers way before, but since the 6 I think that since 1970s they were both more and more important. That they were General Jaruzelski, the first president of Poland later on, and notably elected basically by the American ambassador, because it was said that the all Polish assembly was not it was not like now general election by people, but was assembly, the Polish parliament elected him, and but later every other party said that it was the order from American embassy to elect this General Jaruzelski as first president with this transformation. So there should have been some connections before. What I'm saying is this General Jaruzelski and his right hand of military intelligence in Poland, General Kiszczak, were very good, I must say, and we won't never know, I think. Maybe when they will publish everything and maybe other countries, I'm not sure, but surely some of the Polish so-called legends, as this General Kiszczak said, were actually his agents, like pretending to be real opposition. We don't know who exactly and how many of them, and he said that in Solidarity he had like 1/10 his agents. All Solidarity was massive movement. It was like 10 million members during the peak, and probably maybe he's right, maybe not. But usually when he was old, he said things that are true. So I tend to believe him that he had around 1 million agents within Solidarity, and all the on the ladder of this movement. So actually the Poland was different, and I think Russia is also, as I said, they are basically, let's call it, like herding the opposition, and when there will come transformation, they will be used. I said this Dumin, young person, this Navalny should be like more democratic, and basically that's why I think that this Dumin is like keep apart from this war. He's like he was the head of the special Russian forces, when they were uh, dealing with the taking of Crimea swiftly, and then he's like civil servant now, the governor of two regions, so he's like keeping apart. Maybe after, let's say after, we don't know when, but when there will be closing stages, or the war will be like on the front will be not moving, maybe he will be used as some better version of Putin, let's say. The same could be Navalny, also Prigozhin, as I said. One of the scenarios is that he can also enter politics in some way, we don't know. So it is many people, he not maybe many, few people that we can pay attention to in the future for political career. Also, I remember that Gorbachev was actually, I would say, invented by Andropov, who was the old communist in power in case of some transformation, because Andropov in the late 70s predicted that Soviet Union would need to transform somehow, because there is too much pressure economically, it won't be sustainable. So they wanted some political people who will be like more open to the West, and West will be more inclined to talk with them. And I think that is quite similar now. That Putin is trying and his inner circle to pick up some people who will be to for the West more acceptable as the president of Russia, or more democratic or so on. So I think that basically, as I said, Navalny, this Dumin, there are people. So like this. So basically, as I can say about this, and maybe what you want more about this Putin early career. So basically, was the Soviet Union collapsed. I would say that they transformed. It was not entirely collapsed, and there were some independent countries, and the Russian Federation was like the main country who emerged, but also other countries were independent, became independent, and then Russia, after some time, wanted to make their own borders, because there is some difference, because now the Western government see it as democratic rule, and that there is no matter when the country is located, I would say this way. And the Russia is very for Russia or China, it is very important the old thinking about geopolitics, that the landmass is very important. So they make like line of interest that no one could interfere with. That's why when there was the ideas that Georgia could join NATO, Russia said that it's too much. The same was with Ukraine. This is Prigozhin say that it was not real aim, but I think it was actually that the Ukraine can join NATO, and Russia want to take over the provinces of Ukraine. They feel there is the most Russian live there, and that is strategically important for them. So basically, I think that is as Churchill said, the Russian interest is there.
Well, Russia, it looks like there's been the past 100 years has been a history of basically uh, these fake transformations led by the intelligence services. Uh, every time fooling the West into believing that there is some major change, when in reality the same people with the same interests pull the strings behind the scenes. It's and you have the leadership that changes, but the intelligence services and the interests will preserve no matter who is ultimately appears to be in power. But that brings us once again back to Prigozhin. It makes sense for somebody like that to be seen as a convenient facilitator for various types of operations for somebody like Putin, but that still raises many questions. There were many organized criminals who were coming out, and many of them ended up in the circles with the KGB now, FSB, and so forth. Prigozhin coming out of prison, how did he end up with the starting capital to start those casinos? And how did he, first of all, how did he succeed in that area? How, why him? Why was he, how did he, who were his partners exactly? How did he jump from that to the restaurant business and from that to troll factories and internet propaganda? Those are completely different types of businesses and skills. What is really going on behind it? Who was behind Prigozhin this whole time that made him so successful in so many different and unrelated things?
Yeah, this is hard question to be fair, because I wasn't digging up so deep. I just briefly read about the Prigozhin, his career, and just wanted to see how long he's acquainted with his acquaintance with Putin, how long it is. And basically, all of I gathered is there. So I can't say. I didn't even uh, look into his business partners back then, who they were. Either if they were maybe more connected with the Secret Service. I'm really not. I don't know. But as I said, something should have been in him, maybe Putin himself. So some character traits that Prigozhin will be useful for him. I can just speculate, because I didn't dig into that so much, because
I
I'm
think
I'm
I
I'm
think
not
from
aware.
Mhm. I think
Uh,
I think at the very least we can say that Prigozhin became a very convenient front face for a number of
yes,
different business operations. Whether or not he himself had anything professional to contribute to all these different initiatives, clearly he was trusted, which is much more important than his actual competence in any of these matters. And whoever was actually executing those casinos or restaurants or internet factories, these secondary characters were the ones doing the real work. He was an important face who was gaining more and more legitimacy until he was entrusted with Wagner, which was initially sold to the West as a private mercenary group. And Putin went quite far to separate himself initially from Wagner, to make it seem like any coincidence in interest was just that coincidence of interest, but that it was not promoted by the state. Why did he bother with that distinction? Why did he want Wagner to be seen as a semi-independent or independent effort and Prigozhin to gain this independent stature on his own?
yes. Basically, it was that this kind of Wagner Group, which, as Putin said recently, I think few days ago, that there is no law that allows such groups to exist in Russia. Say that way.
Hmm.
So basically, it was that. The Wagner Group recently, after 2020, was used in many countries. So it is also like some arm of foreign policy. It
Hmm.
could be even said like armed forces, but without being armed forces, something like that. That always Putin can say that they are like private enterprise registered in Argentina and then somewhere else. and they like operating on the invitation of, for example, Central African Republic president or something like that, and Putin has nothing to do with that. So basically like that. Given the foreign policy, foreign armed forces and something like that. Also, they are very useful because if they are not real army, so the death toll or always can be said that it is not army, but some mercenaries died. So it is also for public opinion that they are not our army are dying, but some mercenaries from out of nowhere. Also, this also shown publicly that he was taking prisoners, convicted prisoners to get into his group. So it is also for public opinion that they can say, okay, it's maybe not okay, but they say we have casualties, but they are not our soldiers. There are some people from prisons who wanted to fight for our motherland, but they died and something like that. And basically this. And for also internal purposes, maybe that Putin also all rulers like from the China emperors back then. They also there is the rule also Machiavelli. This in his prince that also the defeat and conquer countries, but also defeat and put some factions to fight each other. It is also the ruler that likes to do. So it could also be like motivation for let's say Shoigu and other generals that we have Prigozhin and you try better or something like that. It won't be never said publicly, but I think that it also that's the thing. Also, given the international law, you are expert. I just had some classes during studies that when there is the official army, there is different, but when there is some private group, there is nothing. As I said, that there's
They're not privy to Geneva Conventions or anything of that sort, and you can't really necessarily say whether they're terrorists or or anything else. There's also no military tribunals because they're technically speaking civilians in uniform, or there's basically no separate international law provision just for non-state actor competence. You're either a
yes.
civilian or you're military.
Yeah, that's right. Also, as I wrote, there is a Blackwaters back few years ago. They changed the name now. So in the United States, there is Blackwaters. They were taking some fight, but it is not so big organization like Wagner became. But
Mm-hmm.
also the other countries have some groups like that. Of course, as I was surprised really because when I read that in Russia we have close to 40 such organizations. Wagner is the massive among them, but there are also another smaller ones, and they also operate abroad. So it is like some kind of not published rule because I get it from some Ukrainian service that they track all these groups. I think that they are more or less trustful source, and I was surprised that there is so many of them. And I'm just looking where I had it was that over 10. I don't remember the correct number. The over 10 were assembled after the aggression on Ukraine. So it is like around 1/3 of them were were for the purposes of Ukraine, let's say in the Russian terms operation, because actually it is not war according to to all to all what we can say legally in Russia, and also there is some economic contacts with Ukraine. The oil is flowing, gas is flowing. Russia is paying for that, so it is like actually war, but like by definition not full scale war. Now it could be like war of attrition actually, because Russians and as I wrote also for citing some article that it is like combining the proxy wars, that Ukraine is proxy for the West and this Donbas army and this Wagner group and other groups are like proxy of Russia, and when they are fighting each other, And also given the tactics that Wagner's and others, they're using this human wave, old school, I would say, tactics of Russia back then, back to the Second World War, and this precise artillery based tactics by the Ukraine and let's say the West, it is the summing up like war of attrition, because it is like balancing each other. So it is really difficult to each side to actually have some decisive victory now. Actually, we don't know what is the real aim of Russia, I would say. They say they claimed what they want, but actually maybe their aim was that to take some parts of Ukraine, most strategic ones, and stay there. We don't know. So
That
actually, if their real aims was there, was this or were more, but actually, as there is some sector of public opinion in Russia, they want some decisive victories and take up more Ukraine. So it is like also some hard lines between probably the inner circle. They believe in this, that it should be the way, and also that some sectors of public opinion. So maybe to ease them, they gave Prigozhin to do them, to believe, okay, we have our man, we support him, he's our voice, and so on. So I think this is also the case, that he's like independent of the army. He's fighting for us, he's fighting great, and he criticized military, what we do, and he's the face of these people also, because I checked the rankings of Putin, they are higher than before the war, a bit, but still. They're fluctuating, but recently they were still over 80%. So he has his way, I think. If it was the aim of this mutiny, this theater, whatever to call it. So basically this. Yeah.
I think
that's
I think it's
yeah.
it's fair to say that early on in the war, Putin did have some political inclination that caused him to believe that Ukraine would be peacefully turned over to Russia, and they could install a puppet government, and Zelensky would run away or get killed easily, and so there wouldn't be a large-scale war to begin with. I don't think anyone was planning a full-scale war to begin, because precisely why they later had to use euphemisms like special operations and come up with all these justifications. What is clear to me is that while the West has seen this proliferation of militias and paramilitary groups as a splintering of their official of the official power of Kremlin power, military power, indeed it seems to be a supportive political decision to distance Russia from accountability and to prolong this legal fiction that this is a special military operation and those are just random private interests, each pushing their own agenda and even competing interests within this group. In fact, all of that has served as a huge distraction, and we saw that when Prigozhin went on the move towards Russia, the West, which was already expecting him to do exactly what he did not in turn move to try to dislocate the official Russian military from Ukraine and push them back. Nothing happened for 17 hours and so forth. There was this period of time where there was apparent confusion in the media, if not within Western intelligence services, but nothing happened. Nothing really changed on the ground as a result of that bizarre couple of days. So can you tell me what was the timing for this mutiny? What specifically sparked of this seemingly theatrical and bizarre series of events? Because Prigozhin's been criticizing everybody from Shoigu to FSB for years. Now Ukraine started moving into counteroffensive. Was it an attempt to distract from that? And if so, did it really work? Because Ukraine kept on pushing. What was the aim? What was the reason for the timing? What were they hoping to achieve? Was it just a way to kind of create confusion in the West? What was it, just to get have an excuse to have a few disloyal generals arrested? Or was there something more that we still don't quite understand?
It was aftermath. There was said that especially the CIA, they knew that something is going to happen, but they didn't know when. Also, they have the satellite images that this Wagner Group is stockpiling their weapons, supplies, and like if trying to go inside Russia, not to fight anymore. And actually, it could have been also the small aim of Russia as altogether, because after the Bakhmut, they went to the rear of the front, and they were resting actually there, because after some big fighting and so on. And then Prigozhin still criticizes the military, and then probably Ukraine could have tried to whatever else to not to allow this Wagner group to just leave, given the actually they were good what they did, because they fighting despite the casualties, gave the results. They won the Bakhmut the battle. And then Ukraine could have been trying to somehow to either hit them or whatever to try to capture them. We don't know. And then, given this, Ukrainian allow them. Okay, if you want to do something in Russia, you go. We don't interfere with that. I think that if there was any aim of the Russia, it was spot on. And also Prigozhin said that he is not they were not fighting, so the military operation, as he said, against Ukraine won't suffer. So it was the case as well. So that's this one thing. The second thing is the timing. It was the on 10th June, if I'm correct. That was the order of the Ministry of Defense of Russian Ministry of Defense, to all these military group to sign the contracts with them to be incorporated as the military unit. And only Wagner Group declined to do it. The others, I'm not sure, but either signed it or negotiated. They didn't say no, and the Prigozhin said no, they won't do it. So it was like first signs that something will happen. Then I also say that former Donetsk Republic Defense Minister Styelkov, it is his alias, but the surname is Gilkin, on his blog also late in May, so a lot more back in time. Also say that Wagner Group will prepare the coup, because the Prigozhin is on the verge of that, and so on, so on. So basically, the CIA knew it, Ukrainians knew it, Congress knew it, and everyone was preparing what to do it. Also the media for sure knew it in advance. And then we have all this. I was actually away only late at the day. I was realizing that something is happening and just following the news. And there was some mess in the media, that some other scenarios was coming out, and very fast. So I think it could have been done without preparing in advance. So I wouldn't say it was that media was surprised, the same as they pretended to. So basically, I'm saying that surely now it is the key question. If it was all set up by Russia, and they feed the West and Western agencies all of this, or it was some connection that Prigozhin actually dealt with the let's say, of someone took some money, or was promised money. I think the promise was to less. I think that if there was money involved, we surely get it. So maybe, but it's all is like trying to find without facts, like only possibilities. So and also all the time these officials from United States say that there are cracks in Putin regime, that at first I remember in Poland and everywhere was said that Russia will collapse, the oligarchs will turn on Putin because they have frozen assets, they can travel, and so on, so on. Even Abramovich was forced to sell Chelsea club, and so on, so on, because the Abramovich is like he's like politician son of Putin, given the oligarchs. I once read that statement of him about him. So basically, all all that West hoped for, it was fit by this Prigozhin action. So basically this could have been. And one achievement I think that overlooked this is that Prigozhin went from Ukraine without any interruption from the Ukrainian armies. I think that's overlooked by many people. That if it was real aim, it was achieved. So and also Putin could have checked who can support such rebellion and who could have been potentially easy to be turned by the Western agencies into their maybe not agent but someone who is willing to cooperate. I think that we don't know these generals disappeared, but if it was them or just there is also other acts of this all scenario made in Kremlin.
Well,
So basically this.
you make a very good point. So Prigozhin leaves Ukraine, which he was hoping to do anyway because he's been complaining about Wagner suffering heavy losses in Ukraine. And that's what people forget. A lot of people, unfortunately, like Bill Browder, kept saying how Wagner is an unqualified success in Ukraine, which is simply not true. They failed many times. They failed in attempted assassination of President Zelensky, and they failed in their military goals. So Prigozhin was looking to get out. He publicly stated he saw the war in Ukraine as a failure, and he was already moving on to thinking about other things, the business in Africa, which is very profitable, and other things. But on the other hand, it's very clear that Prigozhin would not have been as confrontational with the entire Russian state had he not thought that he could afford it, either by virtue of thinking he had sufficient support on the ground, which I don't see how he could possibly have thought he had, because most of the military did not defect and suddenly put down their arms and join him. Or he only had one column, or he had reassurances, or was even asked to do exactly what he did.
Yeah, also there is that also military didn't act. The military in this Rostov, there was the headquarters. There was no fighting. There was just negotiation with the one of the deputies of the Minister of Defense. So also I read some days ago that actually the Prigozhin was this his, let's say, convoy was escorted by police at some time. So it is all really not looking as the typical coup or mutiny. Some say that it was even the Prigozhin may make appearances like that he wanted to prepare it more, but it was that Russian Secret Service get the track of his preparations, and he needed to act more fast. It is one of these scenarios put in some sources, and also he said that they were attacked and he needed to do something, that ministry fired missiles on their camp and so on. So it is what he said, and some experts say that so-called experts, because not anyone who calls that are in fact that at that level. But what I mean that they stated that Prigozhin actually wanted more preparations to see what military generals would back him up, and it was like too soon to be successful, but he needed to act, and that's given the scenario, it was like real mutiny, but I tend to see it as probable but very unlikely, like that. So I think that's the case.
Well, here's another question. All of this, at the end of the day, this move, for what it's worth, has allowed Putin to consolidate control over Wagner and basically remove the legal fiction separating Wagner from the official forces. Why? What if his entire interest was to remove, to give this fake legitimacy to these groups, to use them as a foreign policy mechanism, and to basically distance himself and official Russian functions from Wagner previously? What made him decide that now is a good time to kind of re-include Wagner into his official control?
That's the key question, I must say. I also considered it, but it is not easy answer. I tend to believe that everyone in the West and probably in Russia know that Wagner Group is actually acting as a military. The Prigozhin became so famous that it was not no point to hide it anymore. I think that's the key, and also to legitimate the Prigozhin as some kind of independent human being, let's say like that. That he has his own ideas, he has his own let's say power and so on. He represents some group of soldiers in the army because he was fighting next to the army, and also the some population of Russian people. So it is like I think that as we said at the beginning, that it is some herding of maybe some kind of opposition, because I'm not following Russia too much now because it is quite impossible because all Russian media are banned here. So I don't remember what happens. I can't recall what happens, for example, with Mr. Zhirinovsky. So it could be the some kind of version like that. That Prigozhin can be this taking over this electorate maybe. So I could say this way that maybe he's and also there is the as I wrote I saw I heard this directly on Polish TV, on Polish general, now retired, but he is in many televisions for since many years, like an expert, and he said explicitly that will be. He didn't say any condition. That will be the resurgency against Lukashenko in Ukraine, sorry, in Belarus, and we need to prepare for that. His direct quote. I was surprised that the redactor, the host of this show also asked what we can expect, but he said this explicitly. Later, Russian media spread it also that Poland is preparing something. We don't know. Maybe there was some preparation because we have in Poland some exile government of Belarus, further future government, something like that. So maybe there was some kind of preparation, if not preparation, at least to checkmate a bit Russia, to move some forces into Belarus, just to counter this. So it could also be just said that something will happen, which was not intended, but the real aim was to take some Russian army into Belarus. And that's Wagner can be used now, because some Wagners can say that we don't want to go to Ukraine because we there is no Prigozhin, we want to go to Belarus, for example, where there is Prigozhin. You can say like that. Also, could be that if it is not enough of them, the Russia can say that some military are tired of, for example, being under the Ministry of Defense and will go to this still Wagner Group. So it could be that all of us, you said, most of many members of Wagner Group will join the regular army, but some will say no, we don't want, and they will be used still. And also Putin still can distance himself from them. Said, okay, they still are 50 Grozhin, I have nothing to do with that, and he can play it somehow. I think that also it could be the case. We will see, because now it is still rumors that rumors the other, so I wouldn't even say. Only Putin himself said that he talked with Prigozhin and this Wagner Group, that they were talks, and the new chairman, let's say, of this group will be another person. So he's like he will be chief of staff of Wagner Group. I don't remember the name of him, but it is supposed to be the solution for at least now. So it is all scenarios we can take into consideration right now.
Well,
Like,
if you look at the big picture scenario, as we've mentioned before, that he needed a safe way to leave Ukraine, but since then we've seen that he not just meeting the prospective meeting with the Putin aside, he did recover his weapons from Russia, which he would not have been able to do had he been in any kind of trouble for obvious reasons. There is the rumor is that he's not merely relocating to Belarus to open a base there, but that there may be an opening of a second front with Ukraine from Belarus. That what we are talking about is a redeployment of Russian resources by way of Belarus strategically, because to avoid the counteroffensive, to splinter the Ukrainian forces, to distract, a typical
Yeah.
diversion. If that is the case, we will probably see the preparations for that in the near future, and of course, they can't be ruled out. But what are the chances of that actually succeeding? Russia is at a significant military disadvantage. You can say that Ukraine does not have enough weapons to completely push out Russian forces, but on the other hand, Russia does not necessarily have infinite resources to stay there indefinitely, much less fight on multiple fronts, especially with NATO right next door. What can we actually expect from a Wagner base in Belarus?
There's few scenarios. It is that maybe, as I said, maybe there is actual Lukashenko needs some another forces, because also maybe there is some internal maybe he has some problems with his forces. I'm not I'm say that it is also less likely, but also I wrote that there was some incident with Lukashenko and this Wagner Group way before, that Ukrainians wanted to arrest probably this Wagner Group, and either Russians sent them. It was a bit of mystery what happened, but the Wagner Group was in Belarus, and Lukashenko arrested them after some, let's say, negotiation with Russia. He allows them to go back to Russia. So it was a few years ago, and it was like first recognition of connections with Lukashenko with the Wagner Group. So maybe he needs them for some other reason. I just can speculate. Maybe they are actually afraid of some kind of insurgents may provoke some kind of like that. But I'm actually think that this Polish general said what was supposed for Russians to believe and to move some forces. And now it will be not a regular Russian army, but this Wagner Group. So as I said this, and I think that probably they also can try to take some Ukrainian forces into northern border of Ukraine. But I think that Ukrainians know also. I think Zelensky, also one from the military, from Ukrainian military, say that they put a lot of mines on the northern border, so not many soldiers will move there. So I think if it was the aim of splitting Ukraine forces, it failed, because I think that will be not many forces to use them, and also I think that this Wagner Group also will be not big forces to even try to do it. So I think if it was the aim, so it failed. If it was. So regarding Ukraine splitting forces. Also, there is now actually war of attrition, because the munitions of NATO, and the way the NATO, they are making it like a company. So they produce the expensive weapons and munitions, but there is limited capacity of scaling it. And Russia has many old weapons, munitions and everything like that, and they can just throw it all the time. So actually it's also aim of Russia to make these munitions and equipment of NATO to disappear, and Russian using some old weapons, which are actually useful, because this Polish general said explicitly, he was a tank commander, and said that these old Russian tanks, when moved into defensive positions, can be very useful even against modern tanks of NATO. So it could be the case. So actually, I would say that it could be really stalemate for months, if not longer. Either there will be some long range rockets given for Ukraine, and they can. So I think the Ukraine ultimate aim is to move forces and take up territory, and from this territory they can check the Russian Crimea, that they can have long distance artillery and the rockets to possibly hit Crimea and then negotiate the peace. I gathered this from the Ukrainian sources, that is probably their strategic aim. and Russia knows it for sure. So they will try to move Ukrainians further, or at least leave them where they are more or less now. So we'll see the developments. Also, the summit of NATO was like very ambiguous. There was no clear roadmap for Ukraine and nothing. So actually, I think that also NATO don't want to escalate too much. So maybe that after some time. So there are rumors that France President Macron was talking with the chief of the Chinese president, and they agreed that probably later this year will be some starting of some negotiation. There are some rumors. I'm not saying this is true, but there are some rumors from what both of them said publicly, but not explicitly they said this, but there could be tracked what they maybe talked about. So it is like all things interrelated. So basically, I can say that. So I think that Prigozhin staying in Belarus will be like mystery to either feed all other scenarios in the West and Ukraine, but I think there is nothing, no influence on the war with Ukraine, I think, on both sides. Ukraine won't fail for the trap to move forces, and I think the Russia won't attack from the north as well. So it is only,
In that case,
as I said,
given that
yeah, as I said, to sum up, if it was the Russian aim to take some forces of Ukraine north, it failed.
given the lack of clarity on that front and the unlikelihood of a very near-term additional confrontation, let's look at the actual winners and losers that you've outlined in your report. And you mentioned several people who've actually stood to gain from this fake mutiny or real or semi-real or controlled mutiny, if you will. And they include people like Viktor Zolotov,
Yeah.
the head of the Russian National Guard. What can you tell us about this guy and Lukashenko and Prigozhin's own gains from this scenario?
This lot of I just read briefly, not too much about him, but I put it. I was surprised because he was during the same times with Prigozhin, young, let's say young years, around 30 years old. So he was also, as I said, he was a Boris Yeltsin bodyguard, so he can maybe gave some very secret details of what Yeltsin does and with whom and so on for Putin. And because later he was personal bodyguard of Putin, also he is Putin's sparring partner with box and judo, and also he was I'm reading now, collector of the money from criminal gangs during Putin tenure at the administration of St. Petersburg. So he's very close ally of Putin. And he is the head of Russian National Guard, and Putin promised him to have a heavy weapon now. So he will get tanks and will be like close to real military unit, and he will be deal with defending Moscow of other strategic bases or whatever else in case of some unrest in Russia, at least officially. I think Lukashenko is more like made to be better than he actually is, because I read and I tend to believe them that there is this Alexander Dumin, and he's friend of Lukashenko, but it is not my words, they're words of this Polish Belarusian Polish opposition, I would say, because they are talking Polish, they are Polish minority, so they are like mixed, and they say that they are friends. And also, as I wrote, it is strange or not, the coincidence that this, as Prigozhin called it, the March for Justice was stopped 200 kilometers from Moscow, exactly into a region when this Alexander Dumin is the governor. So and some sources say that he was actually the negotiator between Prigozhin and Lukashenko, not Lukashenko himself. So there is the Guardian article I mentioned about that. Some sources say that. So it could have been this way. Of course, Lukashenko officially gained a lot that he's the crafty negotiator as he was in the Minsk agreements before. So his internal status, I'm not saying in the West because it is mainly for other countries that he's like very good at easing some tensions if they are in Russia. So I see that. Minister of Defense still the winners because they will surely not in the distant. I think if there will be changes, it will be in distant future. Not surely now. And actually Putin that he showed that even if it was real, he was surprised. He acted. Still, he has grip on everything, and that's all. Maybe the people they are disappointed with the how the wars go. Still are disappointed, but they stick to what is it. Also, I think that their main beneficiaries here, of course, Prigozhin, because anyone could view him now like more patriot than the others. Also, I would say like this, that given all this conflict with Ukraine, the war, let's call it, the Putin is moderate. There are more hardliners in Russia that do react a lot more serious way, I would say, given the Nord Stream bombing, whoever did it, I really doubt it was Russia itself. There was again today the hitting of the bridge in the Crimea, and also so it was like slap in the face really. So there is pushing for more reactions. So Putin needs to somehow manage these people and this sector of public opinion, but he once said himself, I remember there was some quote that he said that he won't react too much because of the for foreign affairs and the image of Russia in the world. He didn't say West, but because for sure he in the West he's no longer believed or regarded, but for the rest of the world that they won't escalate. They are showing that actually the other side is escalating. They are just catching up. Also, I said this parallel aggression, that when something happens, another red line is crossed, Russian red line, then Russia reacts in the other part of the world. As I say, it is unconfirmed, but I think that it will happen, that the delivery of these SU fighters for Syria, which changes entirely, to Syria first, but also to Iran not long ago, and then the Iran is the bitter enemy of Israel. So all this Middle East is now changing also because of Russian act of this, and also now Israel is very reluctant to give any material help to Ukraine because of that. So it is like Russia reacts in the other theaters, not explicitly in Ukraine. So it is also the thing to keep attention to, that Putin is not reacting directly, but in the other aspect.
You
So I must
mentioned
say.
a very important point which has been overlooked up until now, because all of the media's attention and the Pentagon's attention has been on the nuclear threats and threats of various forms of escalation in Ukraine or directly against NATO, which, as I've posited before, is very unlikely to happen for many good reasons. But
Yes.
that doesn't mean that Russia is not reacting at all, and they're actually playing in a much broader field than just Ukraine, and they're operational around the world. And frankly, their strategy is actually very similar to what Iran is doing. It frequently does not retaliate directly blow to blow for whatever action against its interests. It goes and does something somewhere else entirely, but thus showing its broad reach and its ability to mobilize its forces and networks around the world, and showing its global power and its global reach and ambitions. And this is exactly what Russia appears to be doing with what you just said. And let's not forget that it doesn't need to threaten Europe or NATO with military action of any sort. It's got its own networks inside Europe that it can mobilize to cause political upheaval internally and doesn't have to win military victories everywhere. It needs to win political and informational victories and doesn't have to expand its military resources. So its real power and influence is certainly not in military, but it can still have a lot of damage politically through these expansive networks and through its operations everywhere and through all these small groups that nevertheless can do a lot of damage, even if they're not powerful enough to confront anyone's military one-on-one directly.
Yeah, that's true. I'm also well aware. Also, I read some time ago, and not now, but the military doctrine of the Russia, and this is explicitly said that they can use the nuclear weapons when their own territory is attacked. So basically, if they Putin annexed it now, officially this region of Ukraine, then maybe we can just speculate when they will be taken over, and then Ukraine Army will station there. We don't know if they use it or not, but is, as I said, now it is given the balance of power and then the tactics used, it is, I think, not much likely that Ukraine will be ready to take it to these regions that Russia is there, especially this Russia is changing tactics. They were trying to copy NATO, moving battalions and maneuvering and so on. It failed a bit because it was good to take, as you said, probably it was the main aim of Russia was to take swift attack and take over Ukraine and so on. And it failed, and also all strategy and tactics failed. Now they are making the switches, and the Gerasimov is in charge of that to change the army for the more like typical infantry. They take they attack and take over the land, let's say, the area, and they strengthen then, build defenses and so on. It's more sluggish, they won't be fast, and they focus on defense and slow. If there are counterattacks, they are not very swift. They are just focusing on taking over and staying there. So it is like also swift in the strategy. So basically, as you say, the nuclear threats are to public opinion in the West, some politicians in the West, and to splitting the West a bit, because there is in the West they are not they are united for helping Ukraine, at least verbally. Some countries do more, some less, but still all of them do. But there are different I would say politics and interest of for let's say Europe and United States, and let's say France from one side and Germany together. For example, France is like very much dealing with China, when the China is now getting like future maybe not enemy, but someone who is main adversary of USA, and then the France is not going for that. So there are some let's say some small cracks within this NATO alliance too. But I mean politically, when it comes to helping Ukraine, they are still united. So if Russia wanted to have some splits in this area, they also failed. But it is one of the tools for sure, because it's always that, as famous politicians in the past said, Russia never is so weak as it pretends and it appears, and so powerful as it wants to be seen as well. I remember from my master thesis that when Hitler attacked Russia, all analyses in the world, including Hitler himself, but also the allies, the Western allies, estimated that Russia will fail like 6 to 8 weeks at most.
Mhm.
So as I said, so Russia is very stubborn in defense years and centuries ago, like Napoleon before, also the case. So actually the Russians are a lot better in defense. So it will be really, as I said, Ukraine only way to have some negotiated peace from the position of power will be to take the the regions from where they can possibly hit Crimea with weapons. So, but Russia won't allow it to happen. So we'll see what the time will show.
Meanwhile, we are seeing that Shoigu, despite all of the criticism launched on him by Prigozhin and many others, retained power, and Kadyrov, who initially was who was starting to challenge Putin on some issues, has actually repledged his loyalty and realigned
Yes.
officially. So all of that is benefiting Putin and his closest cronies. And despite all the corruption and the military, Putin can justify retaining these people by saying, "Oh well, if I get rid of them, it'll show me as giving in to Prigozhin, and it'll make me seem weak." So the whole thing has been engineered to justify bad decisions that put corrupt people in power and caused, military damage to Russia's forces. Essentially, Putin cares more about his public image, it seems, than about having competent people around him.
Yeah, that's true, but also as I said, this Gerasimov is a long time serving in this strategic planning for Russia. So also I don't know that the personal connections with Putin, but for sure they know each other and trust. So the corruption is inherent in Russia, so not to hide it. And also there is the case that so one part of the establishment gets some business and money from the taking over Crimea and Donbass, and now there is turn of the others, and the others are becoming impatient because they want to earn something on this war as well. So it could be playing one against each other again by Putin. Also, as I say, this Chechen is also very important person in Russia. And maybe there are some rumors inside Russia that he was behind all this to show that he is still in the game, and then that maybe he was behind all this Prigozhin, let's say, uh, unsuccessful coup. Maybe like that. Maybe he it was the manifest that he and his people are not going to allow this Ministry of Defense and their let's say allies to do whatever they want. Maybe that was the case to show to them, that to motivate them, maybe not to because there was some rumors probably more true than not that there was setting up tenders for the munitions, and the munitions for the Russian army are that's why not high quality as they should be, and so on, so on. So still the Ministry of Defense is at fault of some things. So maybe it was like Prigozhin explicitly said, he was a voice of these people in the internal circle of power, like that they won't tolerate too much of that. So it is also related like that.
So at the end of the day, all of this did turn out to be, whatever its other impact, it did turn out to be a huge media and military distraction from the actual military combat in Ukraine, from the NATO summit that was coming up, and ultimately there was enough confusion to offset any commitments to specific timeframes or frameworks for Ukraine to join it. So it distracted from Belarus, it distracted from many other things. And at the end of the day, what do we have? Russia keeps on going with its strategy, which you mentioned in your report, human wave proxy, meaning you send in basically a lot of huge numbers of poorly prepared people against firepower, more technology driven Western assistance. And while all these people are getting killed, and the quagmire continues, Russia retains, retains conventional army and retains its positions around the Sea of Azov. And politically, it has not lost its grasp over the separatists in Ukraine at all. They have not they have not relented or seeing that Russia is corrupt, militarily weak, and is not going to gain all of Ukraine. And essentially, there is no breakthrough in terms of either conventional forces or in terms of political countering of Russia's impact in Ukraine?
Yes, I think that if I can guess, I think that Russian aim now is to just consolidate what they have and stay there and wait for whatever happens and the future whenever it will be. But I think that some peace should be. Also, there are some think tanks in United States. They try to advertise the solution like in Korea. That will be like the demarcation line. The one part of Ukraine that where the Russians are will be like for them as it is now. I think that it will be that there is one potential solution that it will stay like it is. But in order do for this to happen, is that Ukraine aim of having distance to fighting distance to Crimea, let's say to shell the Crimea if they want. They need to fail with this. And also there is some reluctance from the West to give many long-range weapons to Ukraine. So basically, we will see what happens next because it was many surprises so far. But I'm inclined to believe that there is most probably scenario to end of this conflict. But so far it will be severe fighting at the front for sure. But now Russia is switching. There is not so much these human waves now. Maybe they will go back because it is useful, particularly in the fighting in the cities because it is far away from now. But this Stalingrad was big lesson for everyone who wants to fight in cities in towns because the Germans made mistake because they used the best soldiers to fighting in the cities, which is pointless because in the city even let's say the child with grenade it works the same like the best soldier because it is not fighting qualities, it is a lot of randomness. So basically I'm not going to say it is moral or immoral, but it is efficient for from this side because they use some people to go purely equipped. Then Ukrainians are shooting at them, and then Russians can see when the Ukrainians are, and then the better equipped uh, soldiers come and fight these Ukrainians. So it is like it is now. As I say, they stopped to making it like maneuverable army, but they will just consolidate what they have and maybe gain some more territories because they are what Putin annexed that is still not is in possession on Russian army. So maybe for sure their minimum aim is to at least get the borders right, let's say, for them, not for anyone else. And for Ukrainian is to take over as much territory as they can. But this it is not so easy because I read reports even in the West that some this new equipment is destroyed by Russian, especially tanks, because there is mines, and these mines are blowing up some tanks, and the other tanks have stopped, and then Russian artillery or aircraft are finishing this. So it is many predicted this could be really long, hard, and many casualties on both sides. So war of attrition actually.
You
Even also
actually,
this
mhm.
given also the changes that Russia made, and also the Ukraine will also be forced to it won't be some swift counter-offensive by the Ukrainians because the Russians made defensive lines really well. As I said, historically Russians are a lot better in defense than in attack. It's like sport-wise.
There is also another point, a very important point that you brought up, and I'd like to kind of dig into all these experts in Polish media, but also all around the Western think tanks, some from Russian opposition circles, claiming that as a result of all these political factions, militias, oligarchs competing for power, Russia would essentially fall apart naturally and turn into a state of civil war or essentially competing factions controlling different aspects of things or territories. Now, I would surmise that Prigozhin never intended to try to become the president of the country. He seems perfectly willing, satisfied with making money from whatever he has, retaining power that he has, and having access to state resources despite all of his criticism. And furthermore, there seems to be a great deal, despite this competing rhetoric from different oligarchs and opposition groups and interests, there are traces of their cooperation with Russian intelligence in furtherance of Kremlin's traditional line all over the globe seems self-evident to anyone who looks closely. So on the one hand, the chaos has been exaggerated and is not likely to happen of its own accord. The group and power and this manipulation of different factions seems to be still ongoing. But on the other hand, it's also, wouldn't you say that the West has also failed to capitalize on potential cracks and on potential differences and left it up to the Russians themselves to fight it out, but without some sort of outside direction, it's never likely to go anywhere.
Yes, as I said, Putin and all his, let's say, stuff uh, are smart enough that they see that there was this color revolutions, Arab revolutions, now in Iran that there was some color revolution and so on. So he banned some long time ago all these NGOs from the West. Now we had some time ago that some journalist was arrested in Russia. I wouldn't say that normal journalist would be arrested. Probably it was real asset for the West, like some kind of agent, and so on. So basically, the Russian is now so closed, and also it was back in the times of Soviet Union. It was maybe it is easy, but sometimes overlooked that, for example, when Russian can send spies everywhere, even if they were even spies in the counterintelligence of MI5 in England. There was some famous Cambridge Five. There were people inside British Secret Service. They were double spies, and they were serving for Soviet Union. And the same could be said in the West. Probably there were many of them during before the Second World War, and the opposite was really hard, because when someone goes to open society, it is not easy to track someone. But when someone from the West goes to, let's say, China or goes to Russia, it is more easy to track some person, and to get someone from inside of Russian inner circle, someone to cooperate, it is, I think, close to impossible even now, because they are all seasoned politicians there in Russia. They are like they know each other for 20 years or more. That they're as we said, the other youngers are also very well versed and probably checked. So it is possible, as I said before, maybe Prigozhin was playing with the Western intelligence to be someone who is like trying to break with all this, and maybe they offered something of exchange. As I there are actually this region, when it started, it is very rich in oil. So if it would be some kind of separatist oil republic of Rostov, it could be really devastating for Russia actually. So maybe Prigozhin played these cards. Give me, I will make a separatist republic of something, my kingdom. We don't know, but actually, as I said, it is explicitly easy to fit some aims or dreams of the West by Russia. It is more easy than vice versa, because we don't really know who is up to what in Russia actually.
Yeah,
So
it
there
seems
is a
to
case.
me that in terms of information warfare, the West is at disadvantage because the Western institutions are fairly open and Russia has had a long time to establish its influence, whereas Russia has been for decades undercutting, undermining, discrediting Western influence, and now quite simply banning it and kicking everyone out or imprisoning anyone who is pro-Western. So there is a lack of reach and lack of access that to any Western groups looking to exploit any potential cracks. They have significantly less room to do that and possibly less skill in that regard as well.
Yeah, that's right. Also, actually, as we can debate here, we don't really know if what cracks are real, what are just a, a bit of showing off what is not true, what is disinformation, what cracks are, how if the cracks are, how deep they go, and so on. Also, I think that Russians themselves, this inner circle, knows that if they start to fighting between them, they will weaken all Russia, and then it's playing on the for the West, for the Western goals. So they also know that they need to stick together, whatever happens. As I said, one of the rumors in Russia is circulating is that this could have been this Chechen, showing that this military is not doing well enough, and then they should focus on the conflict, not this corruption and other things what they did not well. Actually fight with many aspects. So as I said, there is the switch of tactics, there is of provision of munition and so on, but still there are rumors that one general, I don't remember the name, wrote some kind of open letter still that they lack of munitions, they still are fighting without any rotation and so on. There are still flaws, and he's like, I don't know, either he was dismissed or he's like on the some disappearance leave, let's say. So things are still going on between like soldiers at the front and the ministry as ministry far away. So there is some tension for sure. So the Russians needs to play this somehow.
I tend to
So that
agree.
there,
Go ahead.
yeah, because as I said, there is some quite maybe less important, because there is this as they said, Surovokin, not to say the not to not to not to make error with the surname. Yes, so Surovikin, the general, he disappeared, for example, but he was one of the best generals according even to Western sources. So there are some things going on. We don't know if it is for the West to get it, if it is like this or if it is true. We don't know. Also, for sure, if it was even if it is staged, all this Prigozhin coup, then what also put in success will be that if there were some supporters within the military or whatever else for this Prigozhin, and if it was not staged, then he can now track all these people that potentially could be weak link and weak spot, and they can be used by the Western intelligence. So I think that if it was even staged, that Putin now knows who is with him, who is not. So I think that is also aspect to take care of and remember.
I think at the end of the day, I tend to agree with you. Whatever Putin's and Prigozhin's ultimate motivations, at the end of the day, they both stood to gain something from the way it all played out. They all gained some certain things. Despite the fact the West assessment tends to see them as completely weakened, that's not necessarily true. And especially if a lot of this show was aimed at consolidating the support of local populations, which for Putin and Prigozhin right now remains the ultimate goal, then they succeeded brilliantly. And just as important, I think Prigozhin's greatest value seems to be from his propaganda and this manipulation of images and narratives, more than whatever military value that he has. I mean, there with nearly 40 militias, I'm sure they all, smuggling activities are not that, complicated or sophisticated, but playing to the public and manipulating these narratives, that definitely takes some skills. And at the end of the day, what happens is this public deception distracts, it divides attention, it intimidates NATO countries from engaging further. It certainly misleads the level of popular support among Putin and different factions, and their level of preparedness and their commitment to retaining power in Ukraine and elsewhere, and certainly distracts from the bigger picture, which is Russia's ambitions go far beyond Ukraine itself.
That's true.
Ukraine was always useful as a propaganda point, as a country rich in resources, as a point where there was some level of separatist willingness to cooperate by organized criminals and the like. But it was ultimately also not the only goal of of those who are in power, and I think people are yet to fully grasp that. I think the West has not fully grasped it, and that is why NATO continues to prevaricate over the issue of Ukrainian accession. I think it is precisely because they're still stuck on the idea of Ukraine being the ultimate golden goose for Russia that they think that it's still possible to undercut, Russia's ambitions by not fully, not confronting it very directly over this issue. But if you think of it as only one slice of the pie that Russia is interested in, then it's a completely useless gesture of goodwill for no reason.
Yes, it's true. I think that mostly because I don't remember if I wrote it, but it was the case that it was the sign what could have happened in this NATO summit, because the Ministry of Defense of United Kingdom, the Wallace, if he would have been a NATO Secretary General, it could have mean a lot more, some kind of escalation, more weapons, more long-range weapons, and so on. And now when he failed, also probably he won't even be no longer the Minister of Defense in UK, and the Stoltenberg stayed at his post. I think that NATO will not going to escalate too much. They will just prolong how it is, and then that's the case of Russia. Maybe what they maybe see it as we talk, that maybe Russia won't escalate in other areas in the world. Maybe that's the case because, as I wrote, they were testing the Central Asian republics to try to hit Russia in the underbelly, but there were no definite any agreements, nothing. Just there were high level the Antony Blinken went there, some high level officials from United States made tour. I think it was around March, and nothing definite happened. So still the Russia has his own allies in Asia, and somewhere there it won't happen. So there is no possibility to this parallel aggression this way from the West. So maybe they will try another scenario. We don't know. Probably I think that the shift will go to China slowly for United States too, because there were some talking points in this NATO summit that China is aggressive, some kind of wording like that. China answered strongly for this. So I think that the shift will go slowly there. So the Ukraine will be like frozen conflict slowly, and then next chapter could be this, like maybe not hot, but some kind of cold war with China. But it's not easy. The China is like it's very interrelated aspects with China and United States, so it won't be easy for any side to cut ties. Maybe it would be easier for China actually, but even not now. So it is like this long time developments there. It's another topic. As I said, I posted about these rare minerals, and it is like just one of the aspects of what could happen later. As for Russia, yeah, this they are must say masters of propaganda, really, especially for the internal use, for their Russian use. So they can unite nation and unite the other oligarchs, and in this way nothing will happen. As I say, as we talked, they can prepare alternatives like Navalny, like this Newman, maybe someone else. But it's like we see, Navalny is in prison. This Newman is like civil servant, no related to war in any kind. So Prigozhin is now like also out of the war, so maybe he will be used later on too. So yeah, this is all this way.
Yeah, we should probably expect the unexpected in a I wouldn't be surprised if there were some reshuffling of various groups and building up of some militias over others, newer faces, just to keep everyone on their toes. We might see some newer, lesser known faces replace Wagner on a global stage just because Wagner has attracted so much attention and scrutiny, or it could be used to continue the distraction while others are quietly making the money and doing their contraband without being tracked quite so closely. A lot remains to be seen. Well, thank you so much for this
Yeah,
fascinating
thank you too.
discussion.
Bit longer than yeah.
Uh, I hope one of the takeaways from it for the audience is when it comes to Russian's intelligence services, nothing is like what it appears to be. In some of the conventional
Yeah.
wisdom is quite frankly formed by ignorance of the typical methods of operation and by wishful thinking and propaganda more than any real expertise on this issue. So I hope people
Yeah,
stay
that's true.
open-minded and prepared to see unusual occurrences and without a lot of out of the box thinking and being much more proactive. I don't think even if there are real cracks and real openings, we will not be able to take advantage of them without much
Yeah.
deeper engagement and much more creative approach to all of this. Thank you so much for
Yeah, thank you
joining us.
too for the invitation. Yeah, and if somebody would like you can contact me anyone on LinkedIn. So if someone would like to talk or connect, is 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 the invitations are open. So thanks a lot. We can talk about any similar topics in the future. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, and everyone who was watching will be back next week, Tuesday night, 9 p.m. The Washington Outsider report on the Coalition Radio. Thank you for joining us tonight, and have a good night.